Hello, and welcome to another video. I haven't done anything sci-fi in a while, so I figured I'd make a shantytown building to add to the rest. A kind of futuristic, post-apocalyptic world, probably one that had been colonised and abandoned. So similarities with modern day, but with the potential for more sci-fi. To start with, I blocked out the building using foamcore and hot glue to connect it, then used underfloor insulation board to make a base. This is going to be a 2-tier building, and we're going to have a walkway on the first floor. To make the build easier, I'm keeping it in 2 parts for now, so attaching the walls to the base, and the first floor will be attached to the walkway. To make the platform a bit more interesting in terms of shape, I cut a few 45-degree angles and sliced a few sections out, just so it's not so uniform and not so blocky. With the basic architecture in place, I took a few different types of card, some corrugated, some textured, and with a metallic finish. Then using hot glue, I clad the entire building with them. I also forgot to put windows in, so this house won't have many windows. I wanted a larger doorway on the front, so taking a piece of corrugated cardboard and some EVA foam, I trimmed out a frame and glued it in place, using matte Mod Podge. It was also easier to crush down some of the corrugation, so there'd be a nice flat area that I could glue stuff to. To create some pillars that would support the walkway, I took some pieces of foam core, then cut pieces of corrugated cardboard that would wrap around. Using more hot glue to seal them together. With the Mod Podge on the door dry, I then attach it to the front as well. Then also applying the pillars, using the top piece as guidance. Other supports were made with bamboo skewers, either singularly or glued together. I needed to cover up the edge of the foam core and build up some defences for the top part, so I glued more pieces of corrugated cardboard around the top, so there'd be areas to position models behind and provide some cover, as well as stop anybody falling off. Health and safety is important. I then added a doorway made out of more corrugated cardboard and a few triangles of foam core, which, come to think of it, is about 90% of this build. To add some interest to the front, I took a pin vise, drilled 2 holes into the foam core underneath, then used a piece of hobby wire, bent it into shape, and stuck it into the front, using matte Mod Podge to make it more secure. This then adds a nice bit of open space and a break from all the corrugated cardboard. Gluing a small strip of cardboard, just so it's not completely vulnerable and open. Taking more hobby wire, I bent it into shape and glued it into the base, having previously pushed it into the flooring to create some kite holes. Then more foam core and corrugated cardboard to create a roof. Sealing it in with more hot glue. This is where I regret not putting windows in and planning ahead, as I then had to awkwardly push the bits in so they'd be sealed in there forever, and a bit more plating to create an armoured window. So far I hadn't done anything new, so I decided to add a windmill to the top, using some styrene rods to create a frame, followed up by some coffee stirrers, and using super glue to attach it all together. For the blades themselves, I used more coffee stirrers. Surrounding a balsa wood beam, I trimmed down to be roughly circular. Then using black gesso, I primed the styrene rods on the inside and painted most of the inside so it wouldn't stand out as too bright. Taking matte Mod Podge and the textured cardboard, I then added some blades to the windmill. Opting for something that looked a bit like just a big cut piece of sheet metal. Then added a few spikes, just to make it a bit more post-apocalyptic. Using coffee stirrers, I then connected the 2 sides of the wind frame together then put that to one side, while I added some sculptor mold to the base, mixing it up with slightly less water than recommended, just so it would dry faster and be a bit more firm and stiff to work with. The main goal here is just to bulk up the base and add a bit more of kind of natural variation to the ground, and pushing it into the corners where you get a build-up of sand and dirt. This also secures the pillars and the wires into the base as well. Once the sculptor mold had dried, I wanted to reduce the warping, so I trimmed out the excess on the edge of the piece, where it was more prone to being lifted up. Then mixing up some texture paste of black gesso, cork, PVA and fine sand. I then smeared it all over the base, using a sculpting tool and most of my sanity. Then while that was curing, I added some coffee stirrers and small aquarium rocks. Now, if you thought the ground texture paste was the most tedious part, you haven't seen these tiny bedazzle beads. So these are self-adhesive, and you can just plonk them down on any of the cardboard to add some nice big rivets. Much bigger than anything that would reasonably be used, but it's a nice bit of detail. By this point I was happy with most of the cladding, so I took black gesso and primed the entire piece. Then to establish a base layer of rust, I applied watered down burnt umber over the entire thing, so it would naturally pool in the recesses of corrugated cardboard and in the corners. Next up, I took various shades of acrylic paint and picked out individual panels, so it'd have a bit more colour to it. Then taking silver paint and a piece of sponge, I started dabbing all over the piece, where you'd get paint chipping away and exposing the metal underneath. I then alternated this process a few times, using different base layers, and sponging over areas that I was then repainting, just so you add a bit more thickness and texture to the paint. Then for the ground texture, taking tan sand and dry brushing it all over the base, using a large makeup brush. Then working it into the corners of the building, and focusing it more on the lower part of the model. Then giving a light coat over all the metallic plating, where you would also get dust and sand blown onto the decking. Then to add some experimental stuff, I took some foam clay, then tore it into small pieces, rolled them into a ball and smushed them down slightly, then squaring off the edges and stacking them atop each other, so I could create some sandbag walls which would be stuck behind the corrugated steel and add a bit more bulk and a bit more life to the piece. Giving them 24 hours to cure, I then primed them up with black gesso. I felt the piece had strayed too far into the blues and the greys, so mixing up some orange paint with some yellow, I took the sponge again and dabbed some fresh rust on top of the metallic sections. And the orange provides a nice contrast with the bluey teals. Having painted up the sandbags using tan paint, I then used matte Mod Podge to attach them around the sides of the building. I then added a few doubled up pieces of armour plating that I painted separately, because some of the sections of walls felt a bit too thin and flimsy to me. This is also an opportunity to cover up any of the hot glue splodges that you get, and just hide any mistakes. Moving back to the windmill, I painted a bamboo skewer metallic, then stabbed it through the roof, so the windmill would actually have something to turn, and wouldn't be purely for decoration. So there's probably some kind of generator that's spinning around in the centre. And I didn't glue this in place, I just pushed it through the roof, and there was no friction to hold it in place. But it also means I can remove it later if I need to paint it again. Moving on to patching up, there were a few edges and bits which needed covering, so I used coffee stirrers to cover them, and attached the first floor onto the ground floor. There's still a few holes and stuff which need covering, and it needs a bit more colour, so mixing up some PVA with some water, I cut some square sections of tissue and dunked it in the mixture. Then taking the wet tissue, drained it slightly and applied it on top of the piece, primarily covering the hole in the roof, and these are going to become various cloth or plastic sheets, and it lets us cover up any unsightly areas. It's also extremely easy to paint, as the tissue will basically just absorb anything you have off your brush, so taking watered down blue paint, it practically paints itself. But while it was wet, I followed up with a little bit of tan colour, so you get a bit of variation and a bit of areas where the dirt had been bled into it as well. Moving on to the best part of any build, I took a few brown tufts and stabbed them around the outside, again covering any weird areas and making it feel a bit more lived in, as you have to break up your brown environment by adding more shades of brown. With the tufts done, it was complete. So we have this kind of large, central shantytown building. Maybe it's the town centre, maybe it's just a fortified outpost or a farmhouse. That's the nice thing about these buildings, is they can be pretty much anything. And combining it with the other pieces I made, it very easily blends into the environment. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to catch you next time.